for everybody here, aside from just like a big hearty welcome, we these Ecocredit Builder Labs were created to be a practical environment for sharing and hands-on learning for those that are trying to develop eco-credits. Knowing that there are a lot of layers to unpack and there should be collective learning involved. And we want to be able to make ourselves available from the regen team for questions, for workshopping ideas, for digging into the nitty-gritty details, and then also just making it a learning environment for Regen. Like, how could we do a better job of serving credit originators? It's a complicated business, so we want to just make that a two-way road. The way that we have gone about structuring these Eco-Credit Builder Labs is for the first 30 minutes or so to be a demo of some sort. And then for the rest of the time to be breakouts. The last session, we heard from folks like the topics that they wanted to really dig into within breakouts. So after Ned's presentation, I have a short little poll to see like if there are other breakouts from the ones that we have kind of proposed for today, because we just want to make it relevant to all of you all that decided out of your busy days to show up here. So yeah, we'll do a poll after this, pop into those rooms, and then go from there. Any questions before we get started? Cool. All right. Well, Ned, take it away.
All right. Let me get the screen share going here. All right. So this is going to be a fairly short presentation about some work that I've been doing, trying to, push the idea of environmental stewardship and regen network forward. This is what I'll be talking about. I'll give a brief overview of what environmental stewardship is. I think most of you have heard of it or have been involved, but not everybody. So I wanted to just give a really brief introduction, talk a little about this initiative to figure out what environmental stewardship should look like in the future in Regen Network, at least in the near future. And then the bulk of this will be comparing attributes of attributes between, attributes that are common between environmental stewardship and payment for ecosystem services. And that'll become more clear once I get into it. Then I'll show you this visualization tool that I've worked on to be able to actually visualize those comparisons, and then wrap up with some questions and links and things like that. And I'll after the presentation's over, I'll post a note or a link in the chat so you guys can download the presentation. So as far as the definition, this is the definition that we used pretty much from the get-go, I guess almost about 2.5 years ago now. And this was defined by Nathan Bennett in the paper that he published in Environmental Management back in 2018. But I'll read it. It's local environmental stewardship is the actions taken by individuals, groups, or networks of actors with various motivations and levels of capacity to protect, care for, or responsibly use the environment in pursuit of environmental and/or social outcomes in diverse social ecological contexts. And the reason Nathan did this was really to create, some framework around what environmental stewardship is, at least in the academic world. And also, I think he had an intent, for marketing and the business world as well. And what we're trying to do now is decide what environmental stewardship means for Regen Network. Up to this point, I've been considering environmental stewardship kind of as an initiative, and we want to evolve this into a framework. So we do create, either some guardrails or at least a better idea of what we mean when we're talking about environmental stewardship or other types of stewardship as well. And I'm breaking this into two components in my head, at least. the first is this defining what environmental stewardship is in the regen network context. Do we want to put guardrails on it? Do we want to say this project is environmental stewardship, this one is not? Or do we want to have some sort of gradient, like it's, halfway toward environmental stewardship? Or do we just want to keep that academic definition and just say, this is roughly what it is. And if a project fits it, then a project could claim that it's an environmental stewardship project. The next thing is trying to decide how much effort regen, and by regen, I mean Regen Network Development, the for-profit company that Becca and I work for, how much effort should we put into developing a market for environmental stewardship? Because this idea of environmental stewardship is hard for buyers to grasp. It's very different from the commodification of resources or the traditional payment for ecosystem services approach. So how much effort should we put into developing that market? And this presentation is part of this idea of collecting feedback right now. We're trying to get feedback from the community and also from within the teams within Regen Network. So some initial comments that we got, in the just mostly internal comments. One is that we should define boundaries. So it's, we have projects that are environmental stewardship, and we have projects that are not environmental stewardship, and we have clear guardrails and, defining what is in, what is outside. Other people think, keeping it as a broad generic definition is good. Like, we don't want to have it so tight. It should just be a very general concept. Another idea is to create this idea of environmental stewardshipness, which I think will make more sense once I start talking about these attributes, where it's not environmental stewardship or not. It's maybe 75% environmental stewardship or something like that. There's also thought that maybe we should start engaging with the academic community. It's an active field right now, and their findings are really encouraging of how powerful environmental stewardship is, and how it is, encouraging people and sustaining people to do, ecosystem regeneration and other great work. And how much should we engage with them to see what the R&D role should be? Where are gaps? What types of needs does that community have that we could fill with the services that we've got? Some folks think we need to start focusing on selling the environmental stewardship credits that we already have. Some of you may be aware we have it's a sheep grazing and vineyards project that I guess it was last September, October, generated a bunch of credits, and we're still selling those. They're not selling very well, mostly because I don't think people understand what it is. And maybe we need to really focus on getting those out the door so we can better understand the markets before we get too engaged with other ecosystem environmental stewardship projects. And instead of our R&D, Regen Network Development, getting involved in developing markets, maybe we want to rely on the stakeholders, so the project developers, the methodology developers. Let them go out and establish the relationship with potential buyers early on in a project, perhaps, so the projects and methodologies are developed with the buyer perspective, from the very beginning. So try to push some of that off onto our stakeholders rather than doing it all in-house, at least initially. So these are just some initial comments that we've gotten. So now I'm going to move on to this attributes idea. So the first step was really just identifying what attributes I want to use. And the way I've been doing this is by defining endpoints. And I think of a lot of things along gradients. So instead of like it's this or it's this, it's, things often are along gradients. Everybody puts their division on, where one thing should be one side or the other. But sometimes visualizing it, or at least, trying to normalize it along a gradient can really be advantageous. So I've worked with endpoints and gradients, and you'll see what I mean by that in the next slide, I think. And then I worked on a way to visualize kind of these different dimensions of endpoints. So this is the part where I'd like to start getting feedback from people. And not necessarily right now. If people want to talk about it now, great. If you want to comment, I've got some documents, links to documents where you could comment. or, if you just want to reach out, or, if you want to set up a meeting with me, that would be great as well. But these are the endpoints that I'm considering right now. And I've labeled them, on the one side, conventional payment for ecosystem services, the other side is environmental stewardship. And those labels are not, don't put too much into that labeling. It's just, they're two endpoints, and I wanted to provide some label, and that's the best I've come up with so far. So the first set, or this first pair, typically, conventional payment for ecosystem services are based on outcomes and performance. So that's the credit is based on the measured outcomes. The more of an environmental stewardship approach, it's based on the activities. So you're basically, as long as somebody's doing that activity that's defined in a set of methods, that would qualify for the credit. That's how the credit the credit value is determined. The next is focusing on a single metric versus taking a more holistic view. So payment for ecosystem service, like carbon markets, for example, it's a single one-dimensional metric. It's carbon. Biodiversity is turning out, they're trying to do biodiversity projects are quite varied, but a lot of them are working with single metrics. Even if it's a combination of different indices or a combination of different metrics, they combine them all into a single index. So it ends up being a single number versus a more holistic view. There's an ecosystem service perspective versus an ecosystem function perspective. So ecosystem service is what are ecosystems doing for humans. Ecosystem function is what are ecosystems doing for themselves to keep themselves healthy. So it's more of an ecosystem perspective. It's are data used for generating the credits or valuing the credits, or data used for knowledge generation. One side is, natural assets are commodified, or on the other side, it's you're trying to cover the costs of implementing certain activities. The next is the markets determining the credit price, and the other is that the credit is valued on basically the need. So you set a target that I need this much money to do this activity. So that's more of the environmental stewardship perspective. The one is based on incentivization or coercion or it's profit driven. The other is based on support and choice and stewardship driven. So with incentivization, I mean, like that approach is, how can we get money, or how much money do we need to pay people to do something? So that you're trying to incentivize somebody to do something. The support side is, we want to do this. We realize it's important, but we need this money to get started. So it's a very different kind of perspective. And I think, different projects and methodologies have different ways of expressing that. One can be extremely complex or can be super simple. And, what we're trying to do with environmental stewardship is try to make it as easy as possible, lower the bar of entry as best we can. Next is, where does the money go? And with traditional payment for ecosystem, especially the conventional carbon markets, a lot of that money is going to administrators and for validation costs, and not that much is actually making it to the people that are doing the work. And we could flip that around, where all the money is going to the people that are doing the work. One uses secondary markets. The opposite of that would be no secondary markets. On the one side is where a lot of the traditional payment for ecosystem service methodologies are developed from a kind of the buy side perspective. It's, this is what the buyers want. How can we create a project to meet that? Whereas the other is, this is work that we want to do. How can we find buyers that'll buy this? So it's just that different perspective. So these are the endpoints that I've started with, and they're certainly not complete. I'm sure there's some overlap and some that just don't really belong there. So any comments that people have about that would be appreciated. So what I did with those, I'm trying to create a bunch of different axes or different dimensions with each of these attribute pairs. And what I did for each attribute pair is normalize them from 0 to 10. with 0 being, more on that kind of traditional payment for ecosystem services, and 10 being, what I would consider a strong quality of environmental stewardship. And this is how I labeled those different axes. So there's holism, which is, is it a single metric, or is it, many metrics would be on the other side, which right now I'm just saying 10 or more. And I will, I have to admit that this is extremely subjective right now. And I think if there's agreement that this makes sense and we should be going forward to pursue this, then I think we'd want to put a lot of effort into figuring out ways to make it less subjective. But right now, this isn't, almost 100% subjective. A lot of, well, not all of them, but many of these are. Then the credit for credit metrics is outcome or activity based. The ecosystem perspective is a service or function. Data utility would be, is it the credit? Is data used for credit valuation, or is it used for knowledge generation? The economic perspective, is it really, are we trying to maximize profit? The commodity ownership. Is there?
I got you, Ned. I just muted.
Okay. Is it really, people trying to make money off of this? Is that what's driving a lot of this, or is it really just trying to get enough funds? So is it, how much can I make versus how can I get enough? The assistance perspective is, from incentivization on one side and supporting it on the other. The project registration complexity is a complex or simple. Rewards going to the stewards, 0 to 100%. That one's pretty easy and objective. Use of secondary markets, high or prohibited, and offset potential from high to low. And so what I did, I wrote a program to basically where you just create a CSV file, a spreadsheet, basically, with the rows being the project and the columns being these different axes. So don't put much value or much into the actual values that I used here. I pretty much winged it just to get a sense for what these things would look like. So this is all made up. And the biggest circle on the outside is if it's perfect, if everything scores a 10. And I just wanted to kind of show what that would look like. Then for environmental stewardship, I showed that's kind of the bluish one. And the smaller one in the middle would be carbon plus. Which is, that's more of the payment for ecosystem services. That's a carbon market based, it's carbon market plus with co-benefits, which is why it has some of the, the points kind of going out. And for each of these, what I have 2 metrics. One is area. So to say area of the shape of the polygon, or the shape that makes up the radar plot. And the other is the sum. And I originally did the area because I thought that made a lot of sense, but then I realized that the area actually depends on the ordering of these different axes. And, if you change the order, it can change the area. So maybe a sum makes more sense, if you are going to create an index for, this would be like an index of environmental stewardshipness. So it's just and even if we don't go with the concept of environmental stewardshipness, this idea still might be useful to be able to visualize what different projects look like using these attributes or other attributes. So I just thought it could be a useful tool, but yeah, we'll just have to decide if it is a useful tool or not. So these are a bunch of links, and it's not going to be super helpful here until I give you the link to the presentation, but we have a high-low thread that we're using to start discussions. So if people have discussions, that would be a great place to contribute. Or like I said before, you certainly feel welcome to reach out to me or anybody else with comments. I have a couple documents, and the main one to start with would be this, the environmental stewardship future document that I put out, trying to solicit comments. So if you do have time to look at that, and there's a link on there to a video of a webinar we had maybe a month and a half ago, where we started to discuss some of these ideas of the future of environmental stewardship. So that would be a great place if you do have time to comment. And then I have links to some Medium articles that I wrote. The top one is just kind of explaining what the Environmental Stewardship Initiative is. The next one is describing that project that we created for grazing sheep and vineyards. And then the third one was just some thoughts on, ways to develop markets, or thinking about how to make how to generate interest in people, actually purchasing environmental stewardship credits. So that's it. I'd love to open it up if people have questions or comments. And in the meantime, I'm going to post that link to the presentation. And I think that should be it. Let me stop sharing.
Hey all, that's a really cool presentation. Unfortunately, my team needs to jet. We have a call starting in 1 minute. There's a conflict I couldn't avoid, but the scheme is really cool. That it's basically very similar to what we're building with sea trees, more along the biodiversity lines. But I think this is the key point I want to leave with, is that all the schemes that I'm seeing out there in biodiversity, they're all basing it on a mature carbon market model. And environmental credits, when they're first being invented and formed, are different than a mature market. Like back in the sort of early 2000s, when voluntary carbon credits were brand new, the market was just different how it worked. And for people who are creating biodiversity credit schemes or the things similar to what you just presented, who think it's going to operate like a carbon market, it's just not going to work. And it needs to be much simpler. And what you're doing is kind of what we're doing in terms of what I call an ex ante practice-based credit methodology based at measuring impact on a spectrum. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I put some more thoughts in a comment there, and unfortunately, like I said, I have to run, but I'll follow up later.
All right. Well, thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Oh.
Lindsay,
no.
please.
Thanks, Ned. That's a really great presentation. I really love how the framework for environmental stewardship. I have a question, and it's probably not as well formed as I like, but you kind of mentioned kind of difference between for like comparing for stewardship, you're looking more into like the eco steward supply side versus the by demand market driven kind of attributes. Can you expand more on what that supplied eco stewardship focused attribute would look like? Because it's something that we're also looking at, because I think kind of touching back on Kevin's point, it's a new market. So a lot of time to determine kind of value, sometimes the focus has been on the buy side, but then if you focus on supply side, getting that value and pricing can be a bit different, not difficult, but different. So just curious to what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I'm still formulating my thoughts. Like you say, it's complex. And I think traditionally people they always start with, what do the buyers need? That's where things have started. And our work, at least where my focus has been in region, I think most of the people on the registry team, at least, a couple of years ago when we were working with people, we weren't thinking so much about the buy side. It was really, how can we serve the people that are doing the work in the ground? And I took that, I think, too much to the extreme. So when we were creating this sheep grazing credit, I think we developed a really cool credit, and I think it makes a lot of sense environmentally. It's super great. It's great for ecosystem regeneration. It's just common sense. But once we tried to sell those, the reality struck me that selling common sense is really, really hard, and that's just the truth of it. So there are two ways to approach that, and I think the way that I see the biodiversity markets now going, and I think the way carbon markets went in the past is you take the easy way and you find how to keep the buyers happy, and you create everything to keep them happy. But then things suffer. I think projects tend to get very complex. Everything is outcome based, and I was in a biodiversity meeting this morning, and it was just things are just, they make things so complex, and it doesn't have to be if you just use some common sense approaches. So that third Medium article that I wrote, I tried to address some of this. I think one of my thoughts is to, I'm not sure if this is a good way to think about it or not, but I've been thinking about it kind of like the way dating apps kind of evolved. So, when I was young, it was in newspapers. I'm a single white guy. I'm looking for this kind of person, and I enjoy canoeing and stuff like that. And it was all in the newspaper. Then the next version was where we are now, I think, in Regen and a lot of other places where you're using tags and filters. These are the properties, and then if you're searching for it, you search for those properties, and it's it's pretty clunky, but it kind of works. But I think now dating apps are incredibly sophisticated, where it's based on your activity, like with Facebook. Who are your friends? What do your friends like to do? What do you like to do? What kinds of websites are you visiting, and things like that. And I think if we can get to that level with these markets and provide tools both on the supply side. So, when we're working with indigenous communities or other communities that have great stories, how can we, convert those stories into features in this kind of AI feature space? And then on the demand side, how can we figure out what companies really want based on maybe their annual reports, presentations that they give, or things that they type up into a report, and work more in this very high dimensional feature space and try to do matching that way. The technology is there. This kind of high dimensional, feature matching and feature selection is just incredible, what the power. But I don't think nobody's talking about that. So anyway, to summarize this, I think it's a data science problem. And that's the approach that I'm taking. I'm not sure, I could be off base, but I think there's a lot to be said for looking at this as a data science problem rather than an economics or marketing problem.
I couldn't agree more. I'll reach out afterwards. There's a few really interesting touch points for sure. Thanks.
If I could add a few things to that, and then Howard, I want to make sure you have space to ask a question or make a comment. I feel like, Ned, one of the things you're pointing at is just sort of like how thinking of this as a data science problem is like recognizing how much of actually the way that these patterns play out, and a lot of patterns in our daily life play out, are kind of like recommendation algorithms, where you take like attributes and tags and in this higher dimensional space and try to make matches or pairs, and that in complementing the supply and the demand aspects of environmental stewardship, maybe there's certain kind of sustainability commitments. I'm going to mute this person. Certain like sustainability commitments that a corporate or an organization or a family office has that might fit a certain like feature or like a shape to your radar chart, that we're trying to model not just how the stewardship is being practiced, but what are the attributes or the requirements for the commitments that individuals, corporates, or orgs have made. And in a way, we're like matching the radar charts together. I feel like the similar process could be used not just to define the stewardship practices or the success of the supply, but to try to map out a taxonomy of what buyers or demand, what are the sort of attributes of what they're looking for to satisfy their commitments. Anyway, I'll pass it to Howard because you have your hand.
And actually, so I had a very similar comment, although a somewhat different frame around it. And I'm really taken by the attributes in the comparison of environmental stewardship versus environmental markets. And I think certainly it's driven from and derived from the experience with carbon markets and trying to learn and grow from that. I think what I would like to see is a grounding in the way that the carbon markets are driven by the climate benefits of the carbon, getting a handle on the carbon cycle. I think if we could get resilience and the ability to restore ecosystems for the future, to have some, I don't want to sink to measures, but let's say measuring soil vitality and how the the plant and the fauna and the flora are responding, to have some, I don't want to just summarize as health, because I know your model wants to recognize the complexity and the holistic nature of ecosystems and environmental stewardship, and it's different everywhere you look. But I think, and I'll try to distill my comment in, I think we need some denominators that people can measure progress over time and feel very confident it's in the right direction toward achieving the attributes that the stewardship model respects and the services model commodifies. I think that's the key distinction, but I believe most people will expect there be some measures of progress, not just the behaviors, which is where it starts, but to feel like over time that their participation, their commitment to supporting this will be yielding measurable results with some common denominators that cut across ecosystems and activities, which is why I think as the Culture and Carbon Trust goes on, I'm seeing soil carbon, soil health, soil vitality with the microbes and the nutrients being the real measure of success. Is if we're making the soil better for future, where we're making a difference. And so that is the reflections I had. I'm really, I want to commend again the intelligence that went into doing that comparison of attributes, and I commend it, but that's where I see the gap to make it more concrete in ways that people can say, yeah, we're going to get stewards to act, and here's the results of the action, and things that aren't commodities but are values.
Yeah, that's a good point, Howard, and I think that is something that should be reflected. The point that I would like to reflect, that maybe it'd be good to hear if you agree, or if other people agree or disagree, is that whether it's activity based or outcome based, the interest is in the best outcomes. So we're all interested in outcomes. So that's one of the things when people contrast outcome based projects and activity based, they say, well, outcomes are really important. Well, the activity based programs agree with that, and that's what we're trying to do, is figure out the best way to get those outcomes. So measuring and valuing the credit on the outcome is one way, but valuing the activity that creates those same outcomes is another way. And I have my own personal opinions of which is better, but it doesn't matter. They're both in principle going to get the same outcomes, and they both, with environmental stewardship, the measurements are incredibly important. It's just that those measurements that are used to just better understand the relationships between the activities and the outcomes, those measurements are not commodified. It's just used for knowledge generation. But it's important, and this is something that is overlooked, is that they're, regardless if it's activity or outcome based, what everybody's looking for are the outcomes. So I'm not sure how best to capture that in one of these pairs, but I appreciate your comment, Howard, and I want to put some thought into that.
Yeah, and let me just try to simplify it, that I think in the way that carbon markets have carbon as the denominator and biodiversity are more complex using biodiversity metrics, I think there being some common denominators in the way environmental stewardship objectives, achieving the objectives are understood. That I guess is how I would try to reframe it in respect to how your response.
Yeah, super, thanks. Other questions? I guess we could move on.
I think. So.
Well,
Yeah, just briefly, I was reflecting that one thing that comes to my mind is that a big difference between the outcome-based is that there's an assumption, an initial assumption that certain outcome is the one that we are going to be targeting, and we are trying to enter into a certain market. So when we have a property, we say, okay, we are going to pursue carbon credits, and so we are going to be implementing this protocol, etc. And maybe we don't really know how much carbon are we going to be capturing. We have a preliminary sense, etc. Whereas with environmental stewardship, there's an opportunity to gather data with less assumptions on what's the most important outcome. So there's an outcome at the end, but it might happen that after all this knowledge generation and data tracking, it pops up that maybe the water holding capacity of the system, it's way more important than the carbon, or the biodiversity is more important. And so maybe in the future, the markets that you are going to be pursuing from that property are going to be based on this knowledge generation. Might that be, I don't know if you resonate with that. I would like a confirmation or your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. And that's why I didn't mention it in this presentation, but the data collection in environmental stewardship is very important. And that's, and figuring out a good way. And I think we're working on that in our marketplace in Regen, a way to get that out and visualize that so people can understand and actually track projects is helpful. Whether it's an outcome-based project or an activity-based project, being able to visualize what the outcomes actually are is important. And then we just need to figure out how to educate the buy side to look at that and make, so they understand what it is, rather than just looking at a number. Yesterday was 1, now it's 2. Okay, that I understand. But if you're looking at a dashboard with lots of different metrics that are evolving over time, a lot of companies might not even want to look at that stuff. They just want a number that's, they want to buy it when it's low and sell it when it's high.
Well, I feel like within the breakout that you do, Ned, if folks want to continue digging in, then that would be awesome. The breakouts, Austin, do you want to share about the breakouts that we have today?
Sure. So taking feedback from previous labs that we've had, we decided to do some balance of not trying to be too prescriptive, but to give general categories for different phases where folks are at in the process. And hopefully that covers as many bases as possible. At the end of the session today, we'll be submitting requesting a poll from you all to fill in any other topic that you might want to discuss in future sessions. So we're actively taking your input and trying to synthesize the nature of these breakout rooms based off of what you all are saying. So as Becca already mentioned, Ned is going to continue with the environmental stewardship topic, but in a slightly more broad category with MRV, measurements, results, and verification, which we could talk about practice-based or outcome-based. And it certainly plays into what Ned's talking about, but maybe we can discuss that in the context of projects that have joined on the call or potential projects that are coming online. Let's see, the one that I'll be leading is for those who are new to the space. We'll call it like Regen Ecocredit 101. So if you're trying to get oriented around what this is, there's a lot of jargon and language. And you're curious to start up a project or to understand better what's going on. Like, this is just no question is off limits, like welcome invitation. And as part of the goal of these sessions, we've also wanted to take a project that has gotten to a certain level of maturity and try to get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on and what the challenges are and what is and isn't working. And hopefully by shop talking one project that's not at the beginning phases, but in some level of maturity, others can take those learnings and put them onto their own projects. So Becca will be leading a session with folks from GVK Society in partnership with Radis Cotton to do a more thorough dive on a project, how it's being implemented, what's the challenges, etc. And I think we'll just break it up into breakout rooms where it's probably wise to have one person just stay in the main space. That way newly admitted people aren't welcomed into a void. So maybe if you're interested in just participating, well, Becca, I'm not sure if you've already made breakout rooms. If not, we can just, I can like itemize them right now. You're muted.
I have them ready to go. So
Cool.
and if anybody wants to do the Regen 101, Regen Ecocredit 101 with Austin, stay here in the main room. And then there'll be the MRV with Ned, and then a methodology workshop with me and so I'm going to open up those rooms. And if you're not sure, like you can also pop around. It's no problem.
Yeah, feel free to circulate around as you like. Thanks for coming
And
again.
we'll reserve a few minutes at the end just for any like cool sharebacks or for that poll that Austin mentioned as well.
I'm just watching the breakout rooms get populated.
I'm sorry, how does one join a breakout room? I don't think I've seen any.
No, no question. No worries. Okay, so in the more section, the horizontal 3 dots at the base of your Zoom interface, you'll see so one that says breakout rooms, and it might have a little red circle next to it. And they're labeled. They should be labeled. They are.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Take care. Because we don't have a ton of time, and I'd love to get into it as quickly as possible, I would love to just do a quick round of introductions. Those oftentimes take the entire time. But that's a little bit part of the cultures for people to actually get to know each other. So if we'd like to do like a quick round of just, hello, my name is, that would be awesome. And then I'm happy to lead and kind of drive and be like, here's what you need to know. And I've got some awesome colleagues, well, just one awesome colleague, Shyla, to my left. I'm not sure where she is for you all, who can also talk. You can answer any questions too. So just to start out, my name's Austin Wade Smith. I'm the executive director of the Regen Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm of Regen Network. And one of the core like propositions around our theory of change in Regen, I think, was nicely encapsulated in Ned's presentation, where we are leaning in on the fact that local communities and organizations should have the right to define what like regeneration looks like in their context, rather than it be prescribed from a top-down system. There needs to be a system by which communities govern what regeneration looks like. And that might be the governance of the composition of an eco-credit, like what attributes should be included, what is relevant here versus not relevant. And so the foundation does a lot of work with how communities practice governance and own and govern this overall protocol at like a macro level. And at a lower level, how do we gather together to workshop what regeneration looks like in a context, so that that meaning of life and that definition of well-being is formulated at a grassroots level and is maintained. So much of conservation science and a lot of the carbon markets has been at the expense of local communities, and this is fundamentally undermining the program. So we really focus on that. And I'll just pass it over to Shyla, who's my colleague.
Yeah, Hi everyone, I'm Shaila. I'm sitting in Nairobi, Kenya, and for the last 1 year, I've been working at Regen Foundation under ecosystem development with said local regenerative grassroots groups, looking into their governance processes, how they do their regenerative work. We've been exploring different kinds of stewardship practices. We are really interested in ancestral stewardship too. There's a lot of communities, smallholder communities here that have a ton of wisdom that could be definitely used and should be valued. And maybe not in a credit, but in some way. So that's kind of what we've been doing, and that's what we've been exploring for the last 1 year. And this is my first EBL call. I've been on maternity leave for the last 2 months. It's like my second week back too. So yeah, happy to be here, and I'll popcorn to whoever wants to go next.
I'll go next. My name's Sarah, and I am working for a startup company called Cora Global Projects. I am in charge of carbon projects and certifications, which is very vast at the moment. We've got our hands in a lot of different things, but our projects are all in Papua New Guinea, and we're looking at a lot of different possible carbon projects. But also looking at doing a potential Red Plus project, and Ecocredits are something that I'm really interested in, and I just want to stay on top of things and know where things are at in this space. Yeah, and I have a few questions for after introductions.
Great. Thanks for coming. Pleasure to meet you. Brave soul.
Okay, so I can come next. My name is Liliana, and I'm here based in Colombia. I'm in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm just coming out of sabbath year after leaving the corporate world, where I intended to do interesting things, but they're not just ready. And before that, I was just coming also for the international development world, which also didn't feel that I was doing greater things there either. So I'm just kind of like in the search, and I got contacted by Inhabit, which is a little project who is already doing things on land, and I'm understanding all this movement, and this is why I'm here. Like, that's the connection through Inhabit and through Terrazos, because also I've been curiously been working with them on a proposal for IKEA, who's trying to get into the market in Colombia, and so I know Terrazos by that. So yeah, I'm so thrilled to be here and to explore this completely new, wonderful world and environment.
Thanks for coming, Liliana. I don't assume others have to go, so we'll give it some more awkward silence, and then if you feel like you want to introduce, you're welcome to. Okay, cool. Well, if others want to chime in at any point, you're welcome to.
Okay, sorry, I didn't get it. I was waiting in. Please bear with me. I'm from France, and I have a heavy accent, I know. So my name is Olivier, and I've just been at the Refi Barcelona event last month, where I met Nina Jane. And I'm on this call because she spoke to me that she told me that a new project, a regeneration project, could be supported here. We bought 6 years ago land, 32 acres land with 600 in the part of France, which is an old mining region, as a stem for heavy metal combination. And I had no idea how this was existing before, but we researched, and found many resources to do a project where we could mine beetles with plants, and we are kind of started with a lot of very good resources that could be are interested in doing that research, but we have no money, no resources at all to research how mining, which is extracting minerals from the ground with plants, to be applied for decontamination, depollution, because usually it's used to extract metals and rare earth for several industries, not for regeneration land, really, not for regenerating land. So that's why I'm here today. And,
Thanks for coming, Olivier. You cut out a little bit in there. It was like advanced Zoom skills to piece together what you were saying, but I think I got it. That you met Nena at the Refi Barcelona gathering, and there's a roughly 30-acre plot of land that you steward and maintain or own that was formerly a mining site, and you're interested in like bioremediation of using plants to like remove potentially toxic minerals from the soil. So less of a regeneration project generally, but like a remediation, like using a ecological approach towards detoxifying a site, and as part of the larger trajectory of regeneration. I think I understood. That's what you were saying. But lovely to have you.
that's pretty correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. Anybody else like to share?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, am I audible? Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Hi guys, my name is Simalike from Tanzania, from Refi Tanzania. And I'm actually here to learn about ecological assets. We just recently started onboarding some projects over here. And yeah, very new to the space. Mainly focusing on soil health, biodiversity. Yeah, just here to learn how we can onboard non-Web3 communities to the refi space. Oh yeah, we Refi Tanzania, we are a hub of different regenerative activities over here in Tanzania. So working on empowering those projects and building that space in TZ. Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Sima. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Maybe others can chime in to introduce themselves as I like, but I want to make sure we have time to discuss. The point of this is to have time to discuss. I'm going to give like I'm going to tee it up, and then Sarah, I'd love for you to go ahead and take the floor if you feel good with that. I want to just kind of give some context to Ned's presentation around environmental stewardship as a reflection of kind of a larger set of questions or ideas around eco-credits. Environmental stewardship is proposed as a particular type of eco-crediting framework. It is not intended to be that all eco-credits would follow that. And it demonstrates the idea that eco-credit is a general kind of container by which different frameworks around ecological health attestations could be developed and create a protocol for their own definition. So an eco-credit could be much more adjacent to something like a REDD+ or like an avoided deforestation type of project, or a much more conventional carbon drawdown where the parameters of regeneration are more limited. Or it can be something all the way into what we might call like biocultural stewardship or ancestral stewardship, where the presence of keystone species for biodiversity and carbon drawdown are also related to notions of like cultural identity or indigenous sovereignty or social indicators. So Regen Network as a project is sort of an engine for people to bootstrap frameworks around credit definitions according to what they believe is like appropriate. And we're actively in the process of coming up with systems to allow people like the veracity and the integrity of the claims to be like, quantifiably certain or verifiable according to different categories. So you might see some that are pretty close to storytelling and in a way that you might find conventional philanthropic requests for support to be. There is data, but it's oftentimes a story of place in a cultural context, all the way to like a more rigorous outcome-based, carbon tunnel vision type of approach. And I just wanted to be clear that Ned's approach on environmental stewardship was historically called like practice-based methodologies, as opposed to an outcome-based methodology. Or perhaps more accurately, a credit whose initial financing is supported through the verification of practices, and later on over time, as outcomes become monitorable and measurable, it can shift into perhaps a more outcome-based methodology. So there's a spectrum of credit types that we could discuss being developed within the Ecocredit framework. And we could also talk about how a credit might evolve from one type to another over time, because outcomes take time to measure, and the burden of monitoring and verification of that information has historically been one of the most prohibitively challenging parts of developing credits more broadly. So that hopefully that gives some little context to where Ned was coming from. Yeah, Sarah, I'd love to give you the floor if you feel good with that, and we can just take it from there.
I guess I was under the impression that there is not really any kind of eco credits in existence, but I heard about these like leopard eco credits. Oh, jaguar. Thank you. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, how far along are these credits in the space? How many people are working on this? Like the Terrasos standards, are those officially out right now? Are they accepting projects? What's that?
It was officially launched yesterday. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Exciting. Okay. Well, great. I guess I'll go check that out. Yeah, I guess I just was a little confused on like where things were in timeline sense of how far along and when we could expect to be able to start implementing some of the methodologies being developed.
It's a great question. So that's the point of this call. So in existence currently, we use eco credits again as a general like container for the credits that are on the Regen app. So there are eco credits which are compliant to RED Plus and Verigold standard methodologies currently on the Regen app. So projects which have followed existing standards, and they're not necessarily inventing their own frameworks or developing sort of like new, more holistic approaches like what Ned showed. So if you go to app.regen.marketplace, the app.regen.network, excuse me, you can look around in those. It would be the more conventional climate finance type projects. Within the emerging space of like eco credits, there's the one that was sort of the first pass. These are all to market, so like available for purchase now with methodologies and data signing. Like the whole stack is in motion for these to exist. And with regards to those, there's the example that Ned gave, which was the grazing sheep hour, which is it's a practice-based methodology. It's like the first of its kind, which isn't to say it's like remarkably good, but more like it's the first pass at integrating livestock grazing with vineyard cultivation as a sort of like extension of organic certification that uses a multi-species, multi-cropping approach. Those are credits that exist. The one that you're referring to specifically is in a partnership with the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, Regen Network, and a couple of other organizations. in partnership with the Achuar Nation in the headwaters of the Ecuadorian Amazon, and particularly in a community called Charamensa along the Pastaza River. There, the jaguar is both a critical keystone indicator species and also a kind of cultural totem, a symbolic resonance of the Achuar identity, and for a number of different indigenous nations in the Amazon headwater region. So that credit is the first of its kind as a keystone species biodiversity credit, which also takes attributes around indigenous well-being or like indications of buen vivir. And so in the Pastaza region, there has been an active effort to collaborate and for indigenous nations to formalize what's called a life plan, which is according to the terms of a sovereign indigenous nation, what they want, what like future casting, what an ideal buen vivir would look like in 5, 10, 15 years. And so we model the social dimension. Well, in collaboration with the Achuar, they have governed the dimensions, the parameters or the attributes of a credit to include effectively avoided deforestation and proof of keystone species in the form of jaguar, with adherence to the life plan, like proposals to minimize cattle grazing, which has been a major stimulus to deforestation, limitations around hunting practices, around what animals can be hunted when, and these are like community agreements. So that's the jaguar credit. I actually don't really like calling it the jaguar credit because I think it's much more than that. It's around like it's ancestral stewardship, as Shyla mentioned. That project, I'll just give one more. You can see others, is part of a broader methodology that sits in adjacency to, it's next to Terrazos, which is a biodiversity credit that takes a wide number of indicators. The other example that I'll give that's very adjacent to the jaguar credit is called the ERA Brazil credit. It's in Portuguese, but ERA is an acronym. I cannot remember what it stands for. And that is around tracking and monitoring keystone species more broadly. So that's called the umbrella species methodology, of which the jaguar credit took that and integrated like indigenous life plan attributes too. So we took a keystone species indicator and in collaboration with the Achuar Nation, made it more holistic. Yeah, so that's called the ERA Jaguar Umbrella Species Credit, and those are available. So the last one is the Terrazos Tebu Terrazos Biodiversity Unit. To be honest, the word credit, I don't know how helpful or not helpful it is. People have different opinions about it. I honestly find it sometimes more problematic than helpful in terms of trying to move into this territory of like high integrity work. So they have opted to not call it a credit and call it a biodiversity unit. And that takes a wide number of different biodiversity parameters and attributes. They're really pushing into some interesting territory with like eDNA. Well, they haven't yet, but the future of that project is like a DNA sampling, bioacoustical monitoring, and also like, ecological perception, like traditional knowledge around detecting and tracking the presence of animals. So it merges what we might call like more technical quantitative measures with traditional knowledge systems together. And that's part of the Terrazos, which is less focused on a single keystone species. Long answer. Hopefully that was good.
That was extremely helpful. Thank you so much for like laying out the entire landscape that is happening right now. I guess I just have a quick question on the Jaguar credits. Is that applicable to other areas, or that's very regional? And if we wanted to incorporate indigenous life plans and stuff, that we might want to look into creating our own certification.
Yeah, it's a great question. So in the context of partnerships that Regen Foundation has in Northern India, or in some of the Chama communities that Shiloh works with, you could say that there's a clear indicator of ecological health, like the ERA Brazil biodiversity keystone species methodology is called an umbrella species methodology. And that umbrella species methodology is a generally prototypical methodology around identifying the presence of keystone species and understanding that the presence of those species is an indicator for X, Y, Z other parts of ecological health. There's a balance of finding, like, not starting from scratch, but also respecting the life plan and intentions of local communities and indigenous groups fundamentally on a case-by-case basis. So I think a lot of what that points to is like developing workshops or dialogues around what attributes are appropriate to include according to a biocultural identity, an ancestral stewardship type of credit. And it could, the idea that there's such a thing as a life plan that you could pull information from is helpful, but that doesn't always exist in all contexts. So I would say the ecological indicator is generally much more transferable, in as much as we're talking about like keystone species, not like applying a logic from a tropical forest to a semi-arid environment or something. And the social process is something that Shiloh and I work with on a very active basis around what is an appropriate and ethical way of discussing this eco-social attributes. So Shiloh, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that from what you're doing, because I feel like there's a lot of relevance.
I can go on for a while, but I feel as though you've laid it out, really beautifully. I feel like the groups in Kenya are often ignored. It's just a space that's like climate finance ignores, most NGOs ignore, yet like if you think of the years and years and generations actually of wisdom that's just passed down orally, unfortunately, or through stories, through song, and it's just never recorded. This is something that we find extremely important. And I feel if those interventions are looked at in a more bioregional way, focused way, look at it through how the community that's already existing there has been doing it, and find ways of using our technology, our tech stack to sort of, record, measure, and have some kind of records of regeneration that now would be acceptable. I hate that I even have to say the word acceptable, but acceptable and say standardized and measurable for the rest of the world, then we could be bringing them in. And I mean, I say this, but we also have a lot of controversy, while doing all of this, because it's like, how much tech should we bring to these people, or are we making them do something that they don't want to be doing, But at the end of the day, it's how do we recognize and retroactively what's the word I'm looking for? Reward these communities for all the work that they've already done. Because a lot of these communities are living in extreme abject poverty. And it's not because they're not doing amazing work. It's not because they just, it's just the way the systems are. So I feel like a lot of the climate finance initiatives I'm seeing so far in Kenya that are, top-based, as you said, Liliana, I worked in the developmental space as well. And, you go into a place and then you spend, 8 months, looking for people to do research into an intervention, and then do all these feasibility studies and do all these things. But all you have to do is just ask the local people what they've been doing, find out, and we're lucky in this day and age. We have a lot of satellite data and stuff that, doesn't really require that much of a learning curve from people. You can just, use the data that's already existing. But then there's also ways of honoring their practices and using maybe, let's say, storytelling, for instance, if a person's taking a video and showing you how they, do tracking for elephants and why they know that these seasons are there and not there. So it's a very controversial and very experimental, very, new space that it's in, but it's really cool. And I feel as though Austin will mention a little bit also about his, their what do you call it, rights of nature, which is kind of like tied to this as well, you know, because the people are part of nature as well. So if we can get the people to tell their story and use technology as well to kind of add an extra layer to it, and then create it into some kind of credit that can then be sold to finance them back, then I mean, that would be the best case scenario. Yeah, but that's kind of a little bit of the work that we're trying to do in Kenya.
Or like part of the spectrum outlaid, and then Liliana, I'd love for you to go, is that there's a clearly outcome-based, like oftentimes heavily burdening monitor outcome-based approach, which is statistical. And we have on the other end, oftentimes highly qualitative or subjective story narrative driven articulation. And one is considered valuable, the other is not. Simultaneously, you have like that there's ecological indicators like we must save this one particular species of bird. And on the other end, we have social indicators that might be communities who are marginalized or living in poverty, that like the conservation project has overwhelmingly cared about the bird at the expense of local and indigenous communities in a particular location. People in the environment aren't separate, storytelling and the outcomes aren't separate. So how to really work through, and at least in our case, the stack that Region has developed to try to like create a what we call like a trust graph, a knowledge graph, where we can pull from the social and the qualitative dimensions while also not shying away from the quantitative. Like those can be woven together. Like that it has to be that way. Otherwise, we're going to perpetuate more of the harm that like an overly outcome or quantitative driven approach is going to be, or that if it's purely narrative and qualitative, it's very hard to know if it's actually impactful or what's working. So we're very, very like the future of credits is weaving the qualitative and the quantitative, the ecological and the social together. And that's a very exciting space to be in. Liliana, what were you going to say?
Exactly what you just said.
Cool.
And I think you laid that out much better. But yeah, I was wondering, because I've done also some work in Kenya. I don't know if I should say that, but I worked for one of those CG AI organizations, SIAD, ICRAF, you must know all of them. And in people in Kenya are probably tired of them. And yeah, and so my point was like, how do you gain the trust of these small communities and also help them migrate all the knowledge that maybe it was useful for them, that it was imposed to them, but it might be useful for them at some point, and integrated it to their own practices. And I wonder if this whole credit, biodiversity unit or whatever concepts that are new and that represent some financial gaining for along the future, but might be a reward or some kind of like reward system. And also, like, is there a network, I don't know in Colombia, I'm just exploring, but might be in Kenya, which it's such a country that's been so intervened by international development. Is there a network maybe that is like hubbing all these practitioners that are trying to I don't even know which word will be appropriate, but try to invite those partners and those owners of the land to look towards this other side and explore and kind of like integrate themselves into how many are there. Or yeah, I guess that's also just what you just said, Austin. That's just the direction.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. Yeah. Thanks for your questions, and I'm going to start them from the last one because that's the one I can remember. About the network. That's actually like the definition of what I'm actually trying to do with Chama DAO. Is trying to create some kind of network of practitioners so they can share resources. Things like sharing lawyers, having a toolkit where they can actually upskill themselves and understand what's needed to kind of legitimize them and create them into this. Organizations that are having these records of regeneration. So that's kind of what we're trying to do right now. I don't know personally any that already exists. And then another question about how we gain their trust. I've been working in this space for a couple of years, so a lot of the communities I'm working with, I've known for a couple of years. It does take the time to gain their trust, because I was working with them in these organizations, right? And I made some horrible things I regret and that keep me up at night, decisions that affected these people long term, like 2 farming seasons even sometimes, and they lost livelihoods, they lost so many things. And going into the project, it's like you kind of know that this might not work, but then they tell you this is $100,000 or $300,000 project, and you're nobody to change it, So it's like I see it going on, and I feel like it's definitely relationship and rapport. Like you have to know these people and kind of, go through it with them, and then they are also like, I mean, you've seen a lot of people even on this call, a lot of regenerators, a lot of land stewards, people really love sharing. So it's like people are just open and they're like, look, we've been suffering a lot. Our places are suffering. We need this kind of financial support. And if you're going to help, and this is one thing we've done is we've never offered money, to them. It's always like, let me help you support. And that's one thing that people have actually commented. They're like, a lot of these grant organizations or whatever, they always come in and there's always like this like small money grant thing. And it's like, there's always like some kind of money to hook them on. So I think that the lack of money is actually one of the things that have helped a lot. It's like, I want to sit down and have a conversation with you. In the beginning of the project, we did a lot of human-centered design workshops. So from my research was like, I'm sitting down and I would just introduce myself and then say, for the next 1 hour, I want you to tell me about yourself, tell me about the work that you've done. And I don't just like bore them with all this Web3 speak or credit speak or any of this, but it's like an honoring system where it's like, look, I'm in your space. I would love to know what it is you're doing. Let's go on a hike. Maybe you can show me around, So there's a lot of relationship building that was kind of like not even planned, but it just happened. I don't know if you have any other question, but I mean, we can definitely connect.
Unfortunately close this. You should.
Yeah.
You all
We
should
could definitely
be in touch.
connect after. Yeah.
Both of your questions are quite well suited to like the work that the foundation does, which is the bias of this room, which is myself, Shyla, and now Nana, who's just joined. So this is really, those questions are really our primary area of focus. So we'd love to be in touch with you all. We can share contacts in the chat. I'm unfortunately going to have to be admin right now and close all the rooms. So close it up. But this was great. Thanks everybody for the questions in your presence. I guess we have 60 seconds.
We need some lounge music, Austin.
I'm just gonna leave my email here, Shyla, for you to, and Austin for you to contact me whenever you feel. Okay.
Yeah, lovely.
This is so exciting.
We could add you to the newsletter too, if you'd like.
So, and I'm gonna read out from the chat because they didn't say anything. So Tristan works in the wine industry in southern France. So another French person focusing on soil health of vineyards and the supply chains around glass. Very cool. And then Tyler is affiliated with a larger initiative called Bioregional Financing Facilities that was put forward by Finance for Gaia and Dark Matter Labs. They're a friend of ours, quite close friends. And so this project is called BioFi, and it looks like Tyler is developing a BioFi hub. It looks like in the East Coast. I'm not sure where. Anyway, those are the folks from the chat who didn't chime in. Welcome back, everybody. We have a few minutes left, and I know that we were hoping to do like a poll to gather a little feedback. What you would like to see for subsequent sessions.
I could like launch the poll while we do like some quickie.
Yeah,
sure.
Perfect.
Cool. Okay,
So,
this is like a very simple poll. So
yeah, it's gonna be like.
So how was Region 101? Is everybody super learned? Because I could probably learn some things from you.
I'll let somebody else answer.
I guess I can answer. I had asked, my big question was just trying to understand what different certifications are bubbling up right now. in the whole eco space. And so Austin gave me a great lay of the land and different certifications to check out, different standards to look at. And then we were also discussing tying in indigenous knowledge and making sure that we're understanding, not only monitoring with, you know, eDNA and bioacoustics, but also taking the narrative of the people that are on that land and merging those together to create a stronger story, and just valuing that knowledge at an equal level to the more science-based work, and that the science-based work can just strengthen that narrative. And yeah, I thought that was really cool. And I didn't realize that that was a focus of Ecocredits, but really glad to hear that. And I'm excited to go and do some reading and understand how we can implement that in our projects in Papua New Guinea.
Very cool. Stay in touch with your learnings. I would love to keep talking about that. Thanks for the recap.
Well, I'll definitely continue to come to these labs because it's been great so far.
Awesome. We love hearing that. Becca, how was your group? How was the case study group?
Well, I would say, Sane, how was that? Was that helpful to work through some of the methodology pieces like verification and like what the core of the methodology is?
Yeah, definitely useful. And I like this concept of breakout sessions, helping each other, going through it. Yeah, absolutely helpful. Also giving me a good kick in the butt. Oh wait, this is recorded. Yeah. To continue with writing the methodology. So no, definitely very helpful.
Good. I want to see that methodology. It's great. So for everybody, Sunny's been working really hard and doing just all of this marvelous work on the ground with these growers in southern India. And so this methodology is, she's looking to have this be an environmental stewardship methodology. So we're working through just what the methodology is going to be, like the core of it, and then like the verification. They're looking at doing some like geotagged photos to verify certain practices. So it feels really good to go in there, and Christian and Howard had some great support and questions. So that's definitely what we want to be able to do, is like workshop this stuff and help support, keep them moving. How was the MRV group?
It was good. We had some good discussions on in-setting supply chain stuff, a little bit about environmental stewardship, some things about protocols and certifications and standardization. Overall, it was good. Good time.
Awesome. Well, we're basically at time. The poll exists. Please fill out the poll if you're compelled to. It's not required. I think we have a number of different projects that are in the pipeline that would be really good, either demos or breakout sessions around specific Ecocredit projects that are like in the more mature phase, like what Sana was sharing. If anyone on this call wants to be a part of that, to like group think and focus and dive in on your project to move it forward, because community is awesome. The kinship is great, but we're really trying to push partnerships and like get meaningful projects out the door in impactful ways. So if you're interested in like being featured or like being a focus of a session, please reach out to us. Otherwise, I don't know what else to say. I think we're pretty much there. What's good, Becca? What should we say more?
Beyond script. No, you don't have. This was great. I appreciate everybody being here, and keep the feedback coming. We'll see you next month. The poll's there, the Hilo group, you can certainly find us. Come and knock in with any questions or needs or ideas.
Y'all are awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. We see you. Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Thanks, Austin. Thanks, Becca.
Yeah, thanks, Christian.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. I'm glad you could make it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rebecca.
Always, yeah, happy to.
It's good to take it up again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we got cut off, but if we want to just like continue this next month, we can have another breakout and
Yeah, I would love to, because I do think I'm stuck somewhere. I just have to go find how to get through it. And I think this can help. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, then let's just plan that for next time. And I tried to like really get in there and make some comments too to help move things forward.
Yeah, that's also going to be helpful. So I can already
Great.
start working on that a bit. Yeah.
Great. I'm so delighted. All right.
Thanks.
Well, see you soon then.
Yes, definitely.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.